Hi, I'm Sarah Lowe, the Director of Research and Impact at Define American. And today I'm about to share with you some groundbreaking research that we've done with our partners at the Norman Lear Center. In 2018, we began our research partnership that sought to identify and contextualize immigrant characters on TV. This year, we're proud to release the second-year study, which reveals some noteworthy improvements to immigrant representation in just 1 year. We also added a component to our research this year. We used an audience survey to take a deeper dive into how audiences were reacting to the storylines and if it moved them to take action in real life around immigration issues. For this report, we analyzed 129 unique immigrant characters across 97 episodes of 59 scripted narrative TV shows on broadcast, cable, and streaming platforms, airing between August 2018 and July 2019. Now, when we conducted the baseline measurement of the field in 2018, our study found areas for improvement. In 2018, 34% of immigrant characters were associated with a crime. That number was much higher than in reality, so we were happy to see the percentage drop to 22% in 2019. We also saw a slight drop in depictions of immigrant characters in incarceration. So just a note here, we tracked immigrant detention separately from immigrant incarceration. So stories of detention are not included in this finding. And we know in reality that immigrants commit far less crime and are incarcerated less than native-born Americans. So in the coming years, we're hoping to see those stats continue to drop. We continue to see an overrepresentation of undocumented characters. In reality, undocumented immigrants are only 24% of the total immigrant population in the US. But in 2018, 41% of immigrant characters on TV were undocumented, and then this number rose to 63% in 2019. Why the increase? Well, we saw a rise in storylines about the border and ICE raids. A central part of Define American's mission is to lift up stories of the undocumented community. And we're energized by the increase in immigration-related storylines. But while border stories and communicating the urgency around family separation is vital, overrepresenting the undocumented community as solely Latinx or solely a border crossing experience can create a false perception with audiences about the immigrant community as a whole. It just treads on sharing a single story when really there's a wealth of experiences to draw from. This year's study also showed that Asian and Pacific Islanders are still underrepresented in television in comparison to reality, while Middle Eastern immigrants are overrepresented on television. And a few groups were largely invisible, including 0 undocumented Black characters, 0 transgender immigrant characters, and that was for the second year in a row, and only half as many disabled immigrant characters as we see in our actual American communities. Now, the viewer survey is where we start to see and understand how audiences are reacting, but more importantly, how they're acting in relation to the immigration storylines that they're seeing. We surveyed 940 viewers of 3 shows in the 2018-2019 season. They were Madam Secretary, Orange is the New Black, and Superstore audiences. Before we dive into the findings, let's take a look at the audience makeup of those 3 shows, as self-reported by the participants themselves. We were surprised. They were really diverse in terms of ideology, race, gender, and geographic location. The 3 shows are slightly liberally skewed. It's about 43 to 47% Democrat, depending on the show. But there were significant proportions of Republicans and those that identified as conservatives, 24 to 34%, depending on the show. And there was a number of viewers from rural areas as well. So we chose these 3 shows because they had great characters and compelling immigrant-related storylines. But we also knew that the teams behind the shows had done their due diligence, which included visiting detention facilities and consulting with immigrants who'd had the lived experiences that the shows were writing about. Here are the results that blew us away. Does compelling television move audiences to action? Yes, it does. So here's how we broke down the audience. Do you watch Superstore? Great. Then you're going to be part of our study. It wouldn't be appropriate to compare Superstore viewers to people who had never seen Superstore. There are likely major differences in people who watch Superstore and people who don't. So to compare apples to apples, we said, have you seen at least one episode of Superstore this season? If you said yes, great, you're in our study. But if you haven't seen the specific immigrant storylines, then you're considered unexposed. And if you've seen the targeted episodes, then you're considered exposed. And we were in awe that across the board, if audiences saw the immigration storylines in any of these three shows, they were more willing to take action on immigration-related issues in the real world. Madam Secretary viewers were more likely to rally, protest, and march. They were also more likely to attend local community events around immigration. Like, how exciting is that? People were watching TV, like fictional TV shows, and they felt so moved by the characters that they saw that they took action in their real lives and in their real communities. Now, viewers of Orange is the New Black, they took to social, and they were speaking up about immigration by commenting and posting more than viewers that hadn't seen the immigration-related storylines. And for Superstore audiences, they were also vocal on social, but they had the added action of talking to real friends in real life about immigration issues after seeing the storyline on TV. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What about people who have no contact with immigrants whatsoever? Just like the impact that Will and Grace had for the LGBTQ movement, for regular viewers of Superstore, their attachment to the character of Mateo was linked with greater support of immigrants, even if they didn't know any immigrants in their daily lives. Mateo feels like their friend. They feel like they know him. And in feeling that connection with Mateo, viewers were less likely to support detention and deportation of undocumented immigrants. This finding is especially exciting for us at Define American. We began consulting with Superstore 4 years ago when Mateo came out as undocumented, and we've been working with the show ever since to ensure that the character is authentic and it's a representation that reflects what people really go through in real life. It's a careful balance, though. If we get too heavy-handed with immigration storylines, some segments of the audience could have a negative reaction to what they're seeing. In particular, we found this with conservative audiences and religious audiences. For a look at a breakdown of audience segments, we can take Madam Secretary, for example. Religious viewers were relatively unmoved by the storyline, so they didn't have a negative reaction to it, but they didn't have a positive reaction either. But for the storyline, for Madam Secretary viewers who were in rural areas but not religiously inclined, that exposure created more inclusive attitudes in those viewers towards immigrants. So now that we've taken a look at the findings, what can we do with them? First, we're encouraging TV writers' rooms to involve immigrants in the storytelling process and to tell more authentic stories by hiring more immigrants as writers in their writers' rooms and consulting with the immigrant community on key storylines. In particular, we're asking them to look for opportunities to tell stories about underrepresented communities, such as the LGBTQ immigrant community, immigrants with disabilities, and undocumented Black immigrants. And we're also asking them to transcend stereotypes, to avoid perpetuating myths of immigrants as criminals, and to broaden immigration-related content beyond the US-Mexico border. Define American works to help content creators improve accuracy, deepen character development, and identify new compelling stories for their projects. We've seen that stories speak to people across ideological divides. Stories drive real-world action. And the more authentic stories we tell about immigrants, the more actions they take in real life. All this to say, when we change the narrative, we really do change the world. Thank you.